G'day everyone, thanks very much for joining us at the latest planted session, Budget or Fail. Budget or Fail. For the next hour, there's a lot of talk about budgeting or failing and which side of that divide you want to fall on. Before we get to the guys who are going to be discussing with us today, Derek's going to be leading us through this discussion with Andrew and Scott. Before we get to those guys, although we first should say hello. Hello gentlemen, nice, great you could be with us.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here.
Good. Now, before we get back to you, blokes, I should first say, yeah, that's right. My name is Ben McKecken. I'm the host today. I'll be running the PowerPoint demonstration and fielding your questions throughout this webinar. So if you do have any questions, use the chat panel that you'll find in front of you. Go to the chat panel, send me a question. I'm the host, and I'll be filtering those through to Derek. Before I get on to the guys, though, I first want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors of the webinars. Firstly, EA Insurance. If you haven't sorted out the insurance side of your church planning needs, you really need to check out eainsurance.com.au. Don't do it right now because we're about to have a big discussion on budget or failing, but after we've finished, go to eainsurance.com.au. They will help you out with your insurance needs. Also, a giant thanks to Ben Corp, who are sponsoring the Geneva Push webinars. Do you need help to set up your church accounts? Maybe you do because you're in part of a budget or fail webinar. Well, if you do, you might want to be checking out whether you're doing everything properly, or you want to know, is there an easier way to manage your finances? Well, Ben Corp Management Services, they specialize in accounting systems and bookkeeping services for churches. They've worked with over 500 churches over 25 years, and they're already helping many church plants. This is what Corp can do for you. They can set up a new zero accounting system for your church. They can provide training for you and your people to make sure you're doing everything properly. They can show you the most efficient ways to manage your finances properly, provide ongoing support and ongoing bookkeeping. And some of the issues they can help you with, they include everything from payroll and how to pay the minister properly with benefits, managing your projects, events and ministries, and how to read your financial reports and what to do about them. And before we get on to budget or failing, we've got an offer to present you. Corp's got two special offers for Geneva Push church planters. There's a $550 basic setup package plus 3 hours of training, and that's normally worth $800. There's also $600 setup with one employee plus 3 hours training, which is normally worth $855. And I'm not a great mathematician. That's why we've got Derek and Andrew and Scott here to talk about budget. But in my books, that represents a fair. You might want to go and check out Ben Corp's site, let them know you're involved with Geneva Push church plants, and they'll give you that discount. You've got to make sure you include the special Geneva Push promo code GP2016. GP2016, go to bencorp.com, let them know all about yourself, GP2016, and they'll help you out with those packages. Okay, almost there, gentlemen. I'm almost going to hand the reins over to you. Before I do, just another quick thing on some housekeeping for the webinar today. If you want to see the lovely faces of Andrew, Derek, and Scott even bigger on your screen, in your video window that's up on your screen right at the moment, you can enlarge it by clicking and dragging on the bottom right-hand corner and pulling that down. And as I mentioned before, we will be getting to your questions after the initial 20-minute chat or so between Derek and Scott and Andrew today. If you've got any questions on what the guys have talked about or something they haven't talked about that relates to budget or fail, send them through to me. I'm the host. Use the chat window, and I will field those questions through to Derek, who's going to be leading us through the discussion today. So, Derek, who is the Director of Training at Geneva Push, which you probably already know, I'm going to hand the reins over to you, Derek, to get on to budget or fail.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be with everyone this morning. It's good to have Andrew Mitchell and Scott Sanders with us this morning. This morning, you know, we're going to be looking at the question of how we budget for church. It's a question that's often overlooked, something that probably doesn't inspire much passion within many people, but something we do need to grapple with as we lead churches and we talk to people about how it is they use their money and are generous with it. So let me just introduce Andrew first of all. Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background and where you're at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm up on the Central Coast right at this moment at a TV church, executive pastor here. But so a bit about myself. I came to Christ back in 1982 and at Christchurch Gladesville, Anglican Church down there in Gladesville. And I was 24 years old met my wife, Helen, there. We've got 3 children. They're now growing up. The youngest is 18, Jacob, Barney and Toby. But they're all going on with the Lord, and that's all fantastic. In terms of experience, I guess interesting, I came to Christ in 1982. A few months later, the rector rang me up. I was in the UK doing an audit for QB Insurance and asked me to be treasurer. So I've been involved in church accounting for a long time now, and but also involved with a lot of church plants along the way. EV Church was actually, Christchurch Glazel was part of that, and I was the treasurer of EV Church back 21 years ago when it was planted. But also subsequently a bunch of other church plants I've been involved in their accounting, so there's a bit of background there. But in business I've been involved with insurance, merchant banking, and Wesley Mission, General Manager, but also went to Moore College, 90 to 92, and have been involved in leading the church there at Christchurch for a long time. And so anyway, a bit of background in this area to bring to the conversation.
That's good. That's a lot of experience both in churches and finances that hope you're going to pick your brains about today. The other person we have with us today is Scott Sanders, someone who I'm sure most people will know. He's the Executive Director at Geneva Push. There's a photo of him right there, but we can see him live at the moment. Scott, do you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself for those who might be new, and what you do, what your background is?
Yes, I grew up in a Christian family. I kind of always have been around church. My dad's been a session clerk, so I guess I saw him, regularly wrestling over books and the accounts of the church and talking and thinking about finance, just hearing him across the table. I'm a tax lawyer by trade, so I've got an accounting degree with my commerce degree, and part of the work that I did for a number of years is basically consulting to multinational companies and looking at how to structure things, with a view to either minimising tax or moving tax to the most efficient, the efficient jurisdictions around the world. I've been involved with Geneva Push
all legally, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, all legally, all within the law. I've been involved with Geneva Push now for 7 years, and so over that time I've had the joy of sitting down with many a church planner and talking about their budgets, talking about their vision and their finance, and helping guys often who don't come from an accounting background or a finance background, never put a budget together, even a personal budget for themselves. And so I've had the opportunity to, I guess, sit alongside and see the good and the bad of church planners, which has been a great privilege. Yeah.
Now look, the title of today is Budget or Fail. And we are Geneva is a church planning network. We want to see hundreds of churches evangelized into existence. It feels a little bit dramatic. It feels a little bit like clickbait, budget or fail. Isn't it a little bit dramatic? Shouldn't it be kind of preach the gospel and contextualize or fail? Can you just, I'll start with you, Scott. What's it got to do with making disciples, this topic for you?
Well, it's one of the things often overlooked. I think we do lots about, mission systems. We think a lot about discipleship and preaching the gospel and working at our preaching program. We often think about, well, how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to pay for the rental space?
Not sure if we've lost Scott there. We might, Andrew, we might stay from you. On the issue of budget or fail, it feels like a little bit dramatic. From your perspective, is this a crucial area that people who are leading churches and planning churches need to have a handle on?
Yeah, well, like it or not, finances are an essential ingredient of basically any venture you head out on, but it is true for churches. We need our finances in order, and we need to manage them well, and budgeting is critical to that. So yeah, it is a budget or fail thing, and managing the finances, raising the finances successfully, is very important to the church planning enterprise. So, I don't think it is overstating it. It's really important that we get our act together in this regard, and essential for moving church plants forward. It's essential to a lot of things. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to connect it in with our vision and plan, and you can't manage your finances just like your home budget, or if you're going to build something, you need a budget, and without it, there's going to be a mess. So, important.
Yeah, and I was at a Sam Chen event on evangelism last night. Liam Doyle from Lake Mac was interviewed, and one of the things he said about church plants was they bring into great clarity the need to get things sorted quickly for survivability. And I suppose finance is just one of those aspects, but it is a key part of it to know how it is we need to raise funding. As Andrew, you've dealt with leaders over the last X number of years in both your time at Wesley Mission, but also in churches as well. What are the key mistakes you've seen church leaders make when it comes to finances and budget?
Yeah, I think, look, one thing to get very clear on is communication around budget and finances. And people need, I think you need constant communication, seeing where it fits theologically, and communication with people. Look, the main game is seeing lives saved, seeing people come to know Christ. We're not, and because of understandings of what churches are up to and TV evangelists and all, we need to be very clear in our communication that we're not after people's money. We want them to know Christ, and so we want people to give generously and willingly without manipulation. And so I think getting the communication right around finances and getting those foundations in place is really important. And I think the leaders in the church, leaders and teachers in the church, need to be really thoughtful about this and be able to, communicate well around it. And that can be, well, that's a learning thing. And it's easy to get that wrong in the early days of church planning when you're really, as you say, worried about the finances and that kind of thing.
And I think, Andrew, I think, Andrew, as well, what happens is you have church planners who are reluctant then to talk about finance at that early stage. So in their sort of in their documents that are talking about the church plant, they actually forget to even ask people or tell people about what's actually needed, over the first 3 years. And the reality is people are wanting to be generous. Paul talks about the gift of generosity, and so we as church planters, as leaders, I think we're actually not allowing people the opportunity to exercise the gifts and to use the money that God's given them to give to things, because we're too concerned to actually ask them. So I think you're right. I think often church planners actually don't articulate what's actually required, and they're putting out a vision and saying we're going to reach an area. Well, it's actually going to cost, and here's what it's going to cost over the next 3 years. So I think it's really important that a church planner is clear on their budget, so they can actually communicate it from the start to their core team, their law team.
Yes, both things, isn't it?
Owners who really want to give to things. Yep.
Yes. Being clear on the essential place the finances will play, but also clear on where that fits in the priorities. But absolutely right. We need to be able to talk clearly and gain support and commitment to it. Yeah.
Because it is one of those areas as well where people who are not Christians have a real suspicion about churches and finances, and so it can be a tricky line to walk, being articulate about what the needs of the church are for the mission that it has, and not at the same time appearing to the person who is a Christian and has walked in that you are money hungry and only out for people's money. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think we, in the church plans I've been involved with, look, you can talk very openly with the core team and be very clear on this, get people clear on what's required for the coming year and committed to it, but probably doing that in a channel other than the Sunday meeting. So even here at EV, we limit the amount we talk about money in our public meetings and are very careful when we do speak about it, but we look for other channels to talk to people about the needs and gain their commitment. So I think that's part of the story.
We're just having a few technical difficulties here. You know that you'll see a picture of Scott that isn't quite representative of his rugged good looks there on the screen. He's our USA correspondent at the moment. So just a few technical difficulties, but you will hear his dulcet tones still.
So Derek, can I jump in? I think another area where church planners often make a mistake is actually overestimate income. So the reality is the average person in Australia gives about $20 per week. So about $1,200 over the course of a year. And so often I see budgets that overestimate the amount of giving that people they're going to make. Now the reality is that a core team or launch team member is actually going to probably give twice that amount. They're going to probably give about $2,500. But we often see an overestimation of income, and the typical church plan in Australia kicks off with about 38 people. So it's helpful to sort of set goals carefully on how much your core team's going to give. And then on the other side of the equation, on the expenses side of the equation, I think I often see a lot of church planners who kind of just put numbers on a page. Now, Andrew's going to go into detail about how to actually develop and put together a budget. But it's important when you're estimating costs, you actually estimate costs, reasonably. So there are loads of people who have planted churches. Go and talk to them about what it costs to set up a church plant. Go and talk to them about what it costs to do mission in those early stages, what it costs to rent a space to meet in, and talk to your domination about staffing costs. So that's they're really key and simple things you do. What you're trying to do with a budget is actually estimate costs so that you can plan out and give people a picture of what's expected. The other area, the other key mistake I think we also see is that a lot of church planners don't seek to build a buffer. So I think good not-for-profit, cash flow management is to have 2 to 3 months of cash flow on hand, just so you can pay your expenses and pay your bills, but also be ready if something's in front of you, an opportunity for mission is there, and money should never be a blockage. It shouldn't slow you down. So building up a buffer of 2 to 3 months is a healthy thing, and it's actually a wise stewardship thing as well. So don't be afraid to have cash on hand and to be prepared for that that future season that you obviously just can't see at this stage. So that'd be another key mistake that I'd see as well.
Yeah, that's yeah. One of the issues that you've just kind of touched on there, but a lot of churches have to engage with and grapple with is the idea of pledging and the interaction that has with the budget. Andrew, could you just talk to us a little bit about how it is that EV has used pledging in the past or currently does, and how this does interact with the budget and not competed with it?
Yeah, I'll talk about EV. So a big, this is a bit further down the track than church planting, but we've particularly used pledges with our facilities and property. And so EV is 21 years in now, but about probably 9 years ago, there was a big push on property. I've spent $12.5 million now on that, but already have raised $6 million of the gifts of God's people toward that project. And anyway, I've got about over $6 million in loans as well at the moment. But what we've done is have had a campaign every 3 years and put the vision out there for the gospel to the coast and the place, the facilities play in that. And we've asked people to commit a one-off gift and also to pledge over 3 years regular giving to meet our commitments around interest and paying down the loan. Anyway, we've found that's been really worked well. People have kept their commitments, and in fact, so we've budgeted initially on the basis of those pledges, so it's allowed us to budget and know that we've got our loan repayments covered, so to speak, and be able to communicate about that. But we have actually found that more has been received than has been pledged, and so in subsequent years we've been able to understand, based on the historical experience, what's likely to come in the coming year and budget on the basis of that. So the two go together, but it kind of gives a foundation to your budgeting when you have pledges. So that's the EV experience.
Yeah, yep. Have you found, did it have any impact on the regular giving, the regular budget, with people committing to the pledges as well?
Look, it did, actually. There was some movement from the ministry budget into the building budget, and we could detect that. But that sort of washed out over months, and it did have an initial, particularly those one-off gifts, actually impacted the ministry budget. But overall, we're just way ahead. Part of the thing is we think of different pockets, and people can have a vision in different areas of church life and separate them in their minds and hearts and commit to them separately. Or some people have a passion for one thing, not another. So it's helpful to have targets around various projects.
Yeah, that's helpful. Now, look, you just gave us some insight into what giving and pledging can look like further down the track. So EV's obviously a little bit further down than many churches are. Before church planners in those early stages, Scott, you've worked with a lot of planners in securing grants and getting funds, and most planners need a kind of kickstart to get things going at the beginning, and even for that first appointment, the first appointment after the planner as well. Can you talk to us about the balance between church funding itself and receiving help from the outside, and how pledging or grants might help with that?
Yeah, so at Geneva Push, we encourage church planners to get a third from their launch team or their core team, a third from external supporters, and then a third from a seed funding body or a denominational body to as the question says, kickstart the church plant. So we approach it this way because we actually want to see the core team, the launch team, committing to the church plant from the start. And so by encouraging a third to come from the core team, we're actually encouraging the church plant to work hard at actually building a core team for mission, but also a core team to build a sustainable, self-financing church. The third from external supporters gives the church plant the opportunity to clothe the whole church plant in prayer. And so we encourage church planters to actually go to friends and family and churches that they've been a part of as a way of sharing the vision of the church plant and hopefully encouraging more church planting, but also encouraging the wider body or wider church family to actually be giving to the church plant and encouraging prayer for it as well. And then the third area is just that seed funding. Church planting, does cost a lot in that first year, and often in that first year you only have 35 to 40 members, and then when you do get new members, it actually takes time for them to actually grow in the gift of generosity and understand what it means to actually be a disciple and follower of Jesus. And so people often talk about their wallet being the last thing to be converted. And so seed funding actually helps you in that first year where you've got a lot of upfront expenses, you've got a lot of significant costs and don't have a lot of people. And so one of the key things to do when you're actually approaching a major donor or a fund is to be prepared. So to have the budget prepared. Often major donors are going to see the numbers. They're going to see how you're spending your money. They're going to want to see a plan. And so I encourage all church planners to have a simple prospectus. It doesn't need to be flashy, but it does need to set out your vision. It needs to set out the why of the church plan. It needs to set out, who you've gathered and how you're going to the church plan, and just be clear on what you actually need. And I encourage church planners to not be afraid and actually asking people for large, significant amounts of money. There are people in churches who want to give, $5,000 a year over 3 to 4 years, or to give $10,000, or we've had one church planner whose, I think, grandparents received an inheritance and decided to give their church plant, $70,000, and so they've had that on hand, to do a major growth project. So I think one of the things I've seen is that church planners have always had enough money, and so we at Geneva Push encourage a third, and the aim is for that seed funding to decline over time as the core team, the launch team, as the church body grows in their giving. So that'd be my thoughts on it.
So just like that, Scott, when would you say you're getting into dangerous ground in seed funding, or it moves from seed funding into pledging or large giving, moving into dangerous ground that people would say, no, that's just propping up something that needs to stand by itself? How would you assess that?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand different contexts. So I'd say a city plant, or a plant in a middle class, affluent area, generally they should be able to move towards sustainability in 2 to 3 years. So if they move towards 80 members of the church, they should be able to support a staff member and the costs of doing mission and church. If you're in a rural or a regional area, I'd push that out to 5 years. So I'd be really clear with your external supporters and your seed funding body. Actually, it's going to take us a number of years to get self-sufficient, and so we're going to need you to be here for the long haul. And so, I think if you're in a regional area or a rural area, I'd be clear that that you're actually going to need seed funding for a longer period of time. So, I mean, they're just two sort of examples of church plants that have been around. We have done some work with lower socioeconomic areas, so areas where they're planting in a housing section. And my advice to those church planners is actually to have a fundraising plan. So from the start, basically have a vision that says, we are probably going to be a church plant that's always going to need some level of external funding, and so we're going to need churches to partner with us long term. So I'd be encouraging church planters in that situation to find partner churches who can partner with them for the long haul with both people and finance and prayer. So they're, I guess, your three areas. Now it's important not to have too much money, So I know that sounds strange because church planners are always looking to start new things.
Yeah,
but I think you can. Yeah, I haven't seen too many church planners knock back money. But I actually think you can have too much money in the sense that it can leave you being complacent and actually not speaking to your church family about giving. And the Bible is pretty clear that the worker deserves his wages, and the church family, the church body, should be paying for the work, paying for the ministry to happen.
Can I chip something in there, Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thirds contributions and a third from the core group sounds great and would be right in a lot of circumstances. I mean, a recent church I was involved with, they had an initial budget the first year of 120,000 raised. I mean, they started with 30 people. Yes, middle class, but a lot of students involved in that. And so even without that external support, they were able to get up to self-sustainability, within a year. So in some cases that is possible, and yeah, just to be aware of that. But what we did there, just on the pledging, we were launching that church in February, but meeting as a core team through the end of the year, from about August. and asking people to contribute at that point, so we did get some cash in the bank, as you were suggesting, but also ask them to pledge for the coming year. And I think that was a very important process in terms of people getting on board, getting a feel from the leadership in terms of people's commitment to the work and what their financial commitment was, and then tracking that in through the subsequent year. All the giving in that case was direct debits, and so we could actually look at not so much who was giving, but look at the direct debits and get an indication of the overall commitment, how many of the team were giving, that kind of thing. So,
and I think that's a helpful point that you make there, Andrew, in the sense of, how do you measure how are people being generous? And I think we often use the sort of hard number of the total budget and are we meeting budget? But actually, it's often better to drill down and see what are people giving on average. What's the average person giving monthly or weekly? And I think you want to see people growing in their giving. So I mean, I've been challenged here in the United States over this last week, just hearing the average giving in America is I think $35 per week. It's almost twice that of an average Australian church. And so obviously as people mature and grow, we want to see them growing in their generosity as well.
Now, we just need to give it, we've got a number of questions people are sending in as well. So if you have questions, you can send them to Ben in your chat window, and he'll send them through soon. Just a couple of other questions for Andrew and Scott before we take questions from the floor. Andrew, can you just give me give us a very brief overview of how it is you put a budget together? Where and when do you start? How do you balance stretch goals and needs versus historic trends? Just a very brief overview of that.
Yeah. Okay. Quick one. So at EV, we have just had our planning conference, and your financial plan fits with your overall ministry plan. And so we've been doing our planning, thinking about our staffing, that's your biggest expense, and really beginning now we've already got a draft budget for 2017. Now, I would say with the church plant, around September, you ought to be planning for the following year. You also want to plan a number of years out, but just think about the coming year for the moment. So planning for 2017 in September, what's the staffing going to look like? What are the particular ministry initiatives? What is the capital expenditure? What are the big items you're going to need to spend money on in the coming year? It might be we need to upgrade the sound system, or we need a sound system, those big items in the plan, and then draft up your budget. So thinking the expense side, the biggest expense is your staffing, and working out how you're going to pay your minister and working that out. Now, there's ways of thinking about that and working off other denominations and the experience of other churches. If you're new to it, it's good to get a guide as to how people are paying the ministers and structuring that. Look, perhaps I'll go into detail of that a bit later if the question comes. But the rental of your property is probably the next largest expense, and property expenses, repairs, maintenance, fit out, furniture, your sound and AV, that's a significant thing for most people to work out. And the thing is, everything in your budget should have some basis, okay? Now, it gets easier in your second year in that you've got the experience of the year before.
Just explain that for me. What do you mean by should have a basis?
Well, a basis in fact. So your rent, for example, will be based on what school or whoever you're renting from is going to charge you. And so there's an invoice or, if it's in prospect, you've got an agreement from the school or whoever it is around what it's going to cost. So every item, it can't be just a guess. You need to get solid evidence. Insurance is another significant item. Well, you need to talk to your insurer and find out how much is that actually going to cost you. Or
now, Andrew,
on your invoices. Yeah.
Andrew, would you set aside in your budget an amount for missions giving and an amount for a building fund, even in that those first few years of the church plant?
No, not in the first few. Not in the first few years. I wouldn't for building, unless that becomes a really particular thing that you urgently need to establish building. I think building that's a substantial investment and becomes easier as you grow the congregation. So generally, I'd say that's a bit down the track. Missions giving, though, that's something immediate because, well, I'd say theologically, we want people to have a heart for the gospel going out beyond themselves and can be generous and committed to that from the start. My suggestion on that, though, is that it not be part of your normal budget, your ministry budget, but it be another pocket, okay? And set targets for mission, and you might partner with one missionary or another church plant somewhere that you're committed to. Set a target and ask people to meet that target, but keep it separate from your ministry budget. That helps, anyway, helps on a number of fronts. Helps you ensure you're communicating in a way people understand the need, can pray for the need and support it, but you don't end up with decisions then around, are we going to pay our minister or are we going to send money to the missionary? Anyway, that's a practical suggestion. People have different ideas on that, but that's the way I've always operated.
I think as well, Andrew, what I've seen often with church planners is that they've been very sacrificial with their giving, and it played out in the research that we just did recently across Australia that church planners actually, give a fair bit into their budget. So often how that plays out, I think in a finance committee or with your governance committee in a church plan is that you end up sort of reducing your wage. And I think the better way to do it is actually to put the wage that you should be earning, but actually commit yourself as a church planner to give to it. Commit as a church planner to give back the money that the church ought to pay you. And the reality is, a church planner and their family want to get this thing started. And so I've seen time and time again, church planners, give up what they deserve, so that this church plant can actually get off the ground. So for church planners, prospective church planners out there, be prepared to actually be quite sacrificial, not only, with potentially do another part of the country and giving up relationships, but also, giving up, a fair bit of the wages that you earn so that you can get this thing off the ground.
But Scotty, you're saying there, put the real cost in on a principal basis of the stipend or the salary, and then the option then, to give in to the offertory or into the donations giving, rather than take a cut in the first place on your salary. I think that's a good thought there. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, Andrew. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, if that raises a question there, Scott. You said, what is the role of the senior pastor in this? And you're suggesting there's a real tangible, pragmatic aspect to it. As including that aspect, there's also the leadership role of how we talk about money. Because this is, it's hard, it's a spiritual issue. It begins with that, and Paul always says, if you want to know how to think about money or anything else, actually consider Jesus and what he did and his sacrificial nature. Can both of you just pitch in very quickly, because we're just very quickly heading towards time. We're going to take questions from the floor. What's the role of the senior pastor in all this, and the elders and the leadership as well, because they're not alone?
Well, I think firstly, the budget needs to follow the vision. So the senior, the church plan and senior pastor needs to be laying out a vision that that people want to give to, and so so the budget just lays out the financial implications of that vision, as Andrew's already said. So the senior pastor plays a great role with the leadership of actually saying, this is what we want to do, and this is what it's going to cost. So I think that's the first thing.
So the sound system is not the end point, nor even is the first appointment the end point. You're saying the vision.
That's correct. It's what we need to do in order to tell as many people about the gospel in our neighbourhood, in our region, in our city. So that's the first thing I'd say. I think as well, there's two different opinions on whether the senior pastor needs to actually talk about their own giving. And so some would argue, be clear and say, look, hey, this is what we're going to be giving as a family, and we're committing to give, more and more over time to missions and to this church. So there are schools of thought that say yes, a senior pastor should do that, and no, they shouldn't. I think Paul models it in the sense that he talks about working and labouring. You as a are going to need to work out how and what's right in your context. I think it's important for the eldership and the leadership to demonstrate a commitment, and they often do. So, Andrew?
Look, I think it's absolutely essential that the senior minister take the lead in putting out the vision and encouraging financial support to it. And it goes with ministry of the word, and it's the leader who will gain the support for finances. The leadership, if you like the board or church council though, need to be people who support that vision and also can get alongside and communicate, be enthusiastic about that. But key in their role is conveying and helping people understand that the money is being looked after with integrity and carefully, and being transparent about it. So I think they're the kind of roles of those groups. But the senior pastor, there's no option. He needs to take the lead on this.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Now, look, we just very briefly before we take questions, are there any practical resources that you'd recommend for people on this, and how much expertise should leaders have, and how much should they pass on to people who actually know about those things?
Yeah. I think in leading a church plant, leading a church, you do need to educate, get up to speed on finances. There's no, again, that's a must-have, really. Not that you're a full-on accountant, but you do need to understand the numbers and get familiar with budgeting, and be able to understand and communicate around them well. Look, in terms of resources, Bing Corp are guys who talk to you. I think just basic accounting, whatever way you can grab that, pick it up. One thing I've just been working on this year and sharing with people, I've got this Advanced Strategic Planning by Aubrey Malthus. Anyway, look, a key thing is that your budgeting fits in with your planning. And this is a book that I've found really is totally in sync with our philosophy of planning and budgeting. So there's a resource.
That looks like a good read there, Andrew. That was sitting on the shelves next to Harry Potter when I walked past the bookshop the other day, that one. That's good. Advanced Strategic Planning, is that? All right. That's good.
Yeah.
Derek, there's a number of resources on the website. Andrew Mitchell did a great workshop for us at Multiply this year. We've got a number of church planners talking about their experience. There's a number of helpful chapters in books like Planting Missional Churches, even in multi-site churches. If you're a multi-site pastor, Scott McConnell in his book on multi-site has a good 5-6 pages on how to actually set up your budget and to work out how you're gonna pay for a new site. I mean, Geneva Push exists to get alongside church planners. So one of the, again, one of the roles that I play at Geneva Push is helping church planners with grants. Always feel free to send through an email to me if you've got a question. Feel free to talk to one of the planters as well. You'll find, a number of our planners have worked through, the practicalities, and so they've got, great knowledge across the network in that area. The other thing that we're doing this year as well is we're setting up a new website called churchstarter.com.au, and so it's a crowdfunding tool that's actually going to help church planners manage communication, manage their database of donors, and actually help them collect the money. So I'm saying to people, all you need is a dream and a bank account, and then Church Starter will do the rest in terms of being able to collect credit card, direct debit, and help you with some basic accounting on the revenue side of things. So Geneva Push is always just trying to help, just do little things to help make budgeting and finance not a problem.
Churchstarter.com.au. That's good.
Yeah, it'll be launched in the next couple of months.
Yeah, great. Keep weekly check that URL there. All right. Question from Paul: what are the most effective ways to fundraise? Scott or Andrew? Andrew, might start with you if that's all right. What are the most effective ways to fundraise?
Yeah, for your ministry budget, I think it is articulating the vision. And with a church plan, I think it is good getting a document out, PowerPoint. It's sharing that vision, and and it's just simply asking people to commit to that financially. So I don't think, for my mind, it's not about any particular techniques. Apart from that, that's the key. Get the vision out there and ask people, I think in the first instance, to pledge to the coming year and put that down on paper. May do it just anonymously, but get pledges in the first place. That's my comment there. Keep it simple.
Good. Scott?
I mean, the church plants churches, so it's churches that actually do it. So speak with your mother church, speak with your sending church. I'd encourage you to put on an evening in your church, or put on a small group event. Meet with people for coffees. Take every opportunity to not only ask people to give to this project, but to be praying for it, and also to be considering going as well. And so, a church planner should have that, that document in their back pocket, or have that, 3 or 4 sentences, regularly be able to talk to someone about the church plan and about giving to it.
Yeah.
So I think that's helpful. I think, being, again, Geneva Push, just being aware of donor organisations that are out there like Genesis Foundation, who give to church growth projects and church development projects. Talk with your denominational leaders as well. Often denominations have startup grants for apprentices or for startup expenses. So chat with your denominational network. And I'd encourage you to try and have 2 or 3 churches that are actually getting behind you, and work with the senior leadership on how they might communicate that. It might mean you going and praying a couple of times a year. It could mean sending regular prayer updates. So think through how you can do that. The final thing I'd just say is have a database, and it doesn't have to be flashy. It just can be an Excel spreadsheet. Have a database for your supporters and regularly communicate to them. And again, it doesn't have to have lots of pictures or be an amazing, MailChimp newsletter. Supporters want to know what's going on, and so encourage them when someone becomes a Christian. Tell them that you're moving into a new premise because you've grown out of space. Let them know that you're struggling with X, Y, Z. And I often find, people say, oh, well, I heard in that email that you sent through last year, you had this need. We'd love to give it. We've seen church plants be given trailers and projectors and all manner of chairs, resources, just for people actually hearing what's going on.
Andrew, just a question for you following up on that. Just with the team pastoring models at EV, do you staff, how do you budget for each of those areas? Do you think in those categories when you're budgeting the kind of the EMS model, or is it more on a needs-based? How is it that you approach that?
No, we have divided up around, we have a budget for each M and their area of operations and income and expense in those areas. Yep.
Okay.
So, for example, in the maturity area, the bookstall and all its operations fall within that, just as an example. So it's the M areas, but then youth and children's as well. A big discussion for us, though, each year is in terms of our staff and trainees and senior volunteers, where are they going to be allocated? What proportion of staffing is going into each of these areas? And that's a major debate. In fact, I'm about to go into a discussion about it now. Okay. And a lot of to and fro in terms of where we're going to be putting our staff time. So, yes, your time is a big resource, obviously.
Yep. On the pledging process, Andrew, I'll start with you, but Scott, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. About the pledging process, for EV, Andrew, when you've done it, was it all done in the flesh on one Sunday? Or was it by email, kind of drip feeding, building the vision, or some other platform? How is it that you went about the practicalities of going about that pledging process and talking to people about that?
Yeah, we had a series over 3 weeks in our growth groups, and in the last instance, and it was 4 weekends of preaching, and we worked through Ephesians, actually. It's kind of got people to read the whole book in their daily reading, and then focused in on the big vision of building the kingdom and the church, and talk and inform people along the way about the facilities we have in getting the mission to the coast, getting the gospel out to the coast, and also did some practical information around the financing and the issues there. So a combination of Bible and some practical vision stuff and implications financially. And then at the end of it, at the end of their study booklet, they had a commitment form. And we did encourage them over a couple of weekends, one in particular, to flip that in a return box. But they came in all sorts of fashions, actually. That was the kind of focus, but they did come in over a number of weeks. But there was a focused time to make that pledge. And then we told people what had been pledged. We had a target, and we told them the result.
Okay. Scott, any observations from what you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to to report back and let people know how you've gone. So I think that's that's a helpful thing. Again, one of the key mistakes I just see with a lot of church planning plans is that they actually don't put a figure or a number and actually don't ask people to commit to it. So that's helpful. The other helpfulness of a pledge is that pledges might not give you all the income that you need. But if you can say to a group of people or a major donor that you've got 60% or 50% of the funding in place, then that gives them confidence that this is a church plant that actually is going to move towards sustainability and has people backing it already. And so don't be afraid to say, look, we have raised such and such amount of money already, and so this is what we need. We need another $40,000. Will you commit to giving to this gap? So I'd encourage people to let people know how much people have already given, with a view to finding those gaps.
Yep, that's great.
I think with the church plant, whoever's looking after the money, if you're talking 30 people or 40, just say, look, we'd love your commitment. Give people a form and say, hand them back to me, or send them, some way of getting them back, and that's it. But we want them back by this date.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, my experience has always been I hate the ask and I feel awkward doing it, but people's generosity is always much more than I anticipated will be, actually. Scott and Andrew, as we come and finish this budget or fail seminar, what message about budget or fail would you like to leave with us today? With Andrew, sorry.
Look, I think it is God's richly blessed us in this nation with material resources, but budgeting's critical. Let's get good at it, but understand that our stewardship, it's part of growing as Christians, and it's not something that doesn't work with the gospel. It's about growing in our commitment to the gospel, and that will affect our wallets. And so it's part of the maturing process. So it's not just technical money stuff. It's about the heart and growing as believers and sharing in the mission and the vision. Yep.
Yep.
I'd say don't be afraid to bring on people who actually know what they're doing. Every church plant needs an accountant. Every church plant needs that person in the corner who's saying, "Oh, should we do this? Have we got the money?" They need that cautious person who basically helps, I think, the leader clarify vision and helps them, move forward. I'd encourage you to check out, a group like Ben Corp. They've got a lot of experience, and again, the research that we did last year demonstrated that actually having, good stewardship resources in place, for a church from the start actually helps you, it helps you grow. So don't be afraid to set up, Zero Well. Don't be afraid to, invest in one of your key volunteers so that your books are done timely, efficiently. At the end of the month, you know that you're going to get a report from the bookkeeper, from the treasurer, saying, hopefully this is how much people have given, and isn't God great? So I'd encourage you to check out Ben Corp's rates and check out their services and use them. If you can.
Well, look, as part of Geneva Push, we are a network, and we are stronger together. So part of having these webinars and also connecting people is sharpening our thinking on this and seeing how other people are doing it well and learning from them. And so we want to continue to encourage that to happen. Can I say to Andrew and Scott, thanks very much for your time and your wisdom. Much appreciated, gents, this morning.
No worries.
Great to be here. No worries.
And I will pass back to Ben. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Derek, Andrew, and Scott. As I switch you guys off and say goodbye, and thank you again for all your time and your wisdom, bringing this incredibly important topic of budget or fail today. Thanks, guys, as I go through and try to turn video feeds off and that kind of thing. Now, everyone, before you head off and the guys take coffees and water and have a good drinks break that they've deserved, that's right. Let me point out a couple of things for everyone. Firstly, another big thanks to our sponsors of the planner sessions, EA Insurance. If you've got insurance needs, you need to go to eainsurance.com.au. And just as Scott was mentioning, Ben Corp. If you need some help with your church accounts, the Ben Corp team are ready to help you. So contact them about all your church accounting needs. Go to the website, bencorp.com/churches. And remember that if you use the Geneva Push special code, which is somewhere right in front of me that I've got to get in front of my little eyes so I can read it out to you. It's going to show up anytime soon. Remember to use there it is, the promo code GP2016, and you'll get these special offers that Ben Corp are offering to Geneva Push planners. All the details are there on the screen, but go to bencorp.com/churches for more information. Now, very quickly before you head off onto your day, please join us for our next planner session, which is about breaking into a community. It's going to be with Steve McAlpine and Chris Eakins. This is happening on September 1 at 9:30 in the morning. How important is breaking into a community for a church planter? How can we do this better? What are the factors that hold church planters back when we're trying to do this? So join Derek again, who'll be leading this interview with Chris and with Steve on a very important topic. Derek, as we heard already, is the Director of Training here at Geneva Push. Chris, you might not know so well. He planted Coast EC at Foster in 2009. He previously served at St. Faith's Anglican Church at Narrabeen. And Steve McAlpine is a pastor at Providence Church in Midland. It's a 4-year-old church plant on the outskirts of Perth. Both of these guys know what it is to break into communities. They'll be able to share their successes and their failures, and they'll be doing that on September 1 at 9:30 a.m. for breaking into your community. So what you need to do then is head across to the Geneva Push website and register right now. Put it in your diary, and you're going to want to join us on September 1, 9:30 for breaking into your community. Thanks, guys. Another big thanks to EA Insurance and Ben Corp. I've been Ben McKecken. I'll see you again at the next partner session on September 1 here with Geneva Push. Have a great week.